What is up, boys? Today is May 28th. It's about 5:30 p.m. Eastern. This is Flash back with some more charts and another video. Today we're going to go through CCJ and compare it to the S&P 500 and see if we can find a price point for where CCJ could end up at the end of this bull market. So we're going to look at CCJ, we're going to look at Bannerman, and we're going to look at Paladin and do some just kind of price projections, so to speak, using ratios. And yeah, I think it'll give us some pretty interesting targets. So what you see here is CCJ on the quarterly time frame. I'm going to drop down to the monthly. And here we go. So I'm going to pull up CCJ measured in the S&P 500. And so last cycle, or last bull market, I should say, CCJ kind of began at around 0.0015 and it ended the bull market probably around 0.032. We'll say that's kind of the line in the sand here in terms of how CCJ topped out when measured in the S&P 500. So 0.032 will kind of be our benchmark. So say we revisit 0.032 by the end of this bull market. And so what that would entail is us continuing to outperform the S&P 500 and maybe reaching there, by 2030 or so. We'll say that for the sake of the exercise, right? Okay, so what is the S&P 500 today? SPX is about 5,300. So let's take a round number. We'll call it 5,000. We'll say that whether we go sideways in the S&P 500 or not, let's just take 5,000 as kind of a ballpark estimate of how we can measure the S&P 500. Sure, it could go up, sure, it could go down, but it's a nice round number. It's good for our exercise, right? So let's go back to CCJ and say, okay, so what was our number? It was 0.032. So what we're going to do is take CCJ here. We're going to bring up our calculator. We're going to go 5,000 times 0.032. And that comes with a price tag of about 160 bucks for CCJ. Funny enough, if we follow this trend line and go exactly up the middle of it, 160 bucks gets us to right at the middle of this trend line and the top of this price channel that we may or may not be in. But I think that's a super interesting price target because it matches up so perfectly with kind of this projection that you see on the screen, right? Okay, so CCJ 0.032 times 5,000, which is the price of the S&P. We don't know if that's going to stay there or not. Okay, so let's say this is what CCJ gets to by the end of the bull market. Let's pull up Bannerman. Another nice looking chart in Bannerman. Gotta love it. If we go up to the ratio and pull up Bannerman measured in CCJ, this could get interesting. So at the top of the bull market last time, Bannerman reached about, we'll call it 0.94. So let's get 0.94. And that's kind of at the end of this arc, actually. Okay. So if CCJ is $160 at the end of the bull market, we can go $160 times 0.94. And that gets a Bannerman price tag of about $150. So where would that put us on this chart, target-wise? Maybe we follow this up. $150. Wow, that's way up there. That's interesting. But I mean, it's within this decade. The middle of that trend line is in February of 2029. So I mean, it's within this trend line that we could or could not be in. I imagine Bannerman will likely do, we are in this cup or cup and handle formation potentially. We could form some sort of a bull flag at the end of this cup. It could be higher. Maybe it's right here. And then we kind of a pole move, who's to say? Again, sometimes these can be like moon boy type targets, but it's kind of interesting to keep in mind, right? So what was that, 0.94? Okay, so we got CCJ at $160, Bannerman at about $150. What about Paladin measured in CCJ? Because this also looks good, right? So if we revisit our previous ratio of Paladin measured in CCJ, it's what, about, we'll call it 2.3. Okay, so if CCJ is $160 at the end of the bull market, 160 times 2.3, did we say? Oh man, I'm messing this up. Sorry, boys. 160 times 2.3. Okay, that gets a price target of Paladin at $368. Okay, so let's go 368. Like right here. I mean, it's it's in the middle of the channel. It's in this channel, the bigger, broader channel. I mean, who's to say that can't happen, right? I mean, we saw what Paladin did last cycle. It pretty much went straight up from June 03 to, we'll call it June 07. So 4 years. So this kind of went straight up starting April of 2020. Could be April of 2027. So that would be 7 years. So, you know, maybe a little bit less aggressive on the time scale. But so far, this, I mean, it's going according to plan. So, I mean, who's to say where these prices end up, guys? The point of the exercise is to use some ratios. You know, let's compare the S&P 500 to CCJ, and let's look at some other stocks that are measured in CCJ, see who might be an outperformer of CCJ. For example, I think Bannerman could outperform CCJ. I think Paladin could outperform CCJ. So that's just two examples. These Paladin and Bannerman are going to be in my top 5, and CCJ for that matter, because they are leaders. And so just kind of a fun exercise to do to see where things could end up, assuming the S&P 500 stays roughly around $5,000. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Drop me a like if you think this is helpful, and I'll see you guys in the next video.